Good morning. We are in John chapter 19, verse 32. And so yesterday we read about how the Jews asked Pilate, halfway through 31, that their legs might be broken and that they may be taken away. So again, this was because the Sabbath, the high Sabbath, as we discussed yesterday, was coming quickly, about 3 hours away. And so they wanted to break the legs of the men who were hanging on the crosses beside Jesus, one to his left and one to his right, so that they would not be able to hold their bodies up, so that their arms would be hung and stretched wide like that, so that they would suffocate and die, so that they would not be up during this high holy day. Verse 32 says, "Then the soldiers came, and they broke the legs of the first, and the other who was crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead. They did not break his legs." I'm drawing a blank. Maybe I have it in Matthew. Just out of curiosity, I'm just going to swing over to Matthew real quick. No, I don't have it written down. Prophetically, his bones were not to be broken. You didn't break the bones of a sacrifice. And again, this all goes back to that picture of the sacrificial lamb. We read in Psalm 22, I think we read it last time, or at least a couple days ago, that my bones are out of joint. Right? But I can count my bones, but they're out of joint. The idea was they're not broken, yet they're dislocated. And that's what would happen as your arms are being stretched wide, is that dislocation of your shoulders. And so, it says in verse 34, "But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear. Immediately, blood and water came out." So, this blood and water is what's called a pericardial effusion. And what it is he had died, and most likely from that heart attack, from that Takotsubo myopathy, aka broken heart syndrome. And I actually have interesting. Let's take a look at Psalm 69. I've got other stuff I want to talk about too, but hey, when you got cross references, you got cross references. 20 and 21. Ah, yes. Wow. So, "Zeal for your house has eaten me up" in verse 9. That was attributed to Jesus. Psalm 69 is a messianic psalm that it has parts of it attributed to Jesus. Now, we know verse 21, "They also gave me gall for my food. For my thirst, they gave me vinegar to drink." That is when he says, "I thirst," right? They give him up the sponge with that sour wine, the vinegar. But look at verse 20 of Psalm 69. And it says, "Reproach has broken my heart, and I am full of heaviness. I looked for someone to take pity, but there was none, and for comforters, but I found none." So it's a psalm, but it's from the cross. That's the idea, is that he was so weak already. In fact, Mark 15:44, Pilate actually is surprised how fast he died. Let's see here, Mark 15:44, "Pilate marveled that he was already dead, and summoning a centurion, he asked if he had been dead for some time." So again, the record low, I think I said 14, but I think it's 13 hours, was the shortest crucifixion on record aside from Christ. Some crucifixions had been recorded to last over a week. Over 1 week, the people hanging there on the cross. And so, surprised that he died so fast, He dies from a broken heart. From that, water kind of surrounds a sac around the heart. And so when the spear is thrust up under his rib cage and it pierced his heart, we see blood and water coming out. Now, where was I reading? But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately, and immediately blood and water came out. Now, a verse that you might have just in the back of your mind, one you might want to keep in memory if you're ever having a discussion with a Jewish person about the Messiah. And if you turn to Zechariah chapter 12, Malachi, too far is Malachi, right? Zechariah, there we go. Back up a little. In verse 10, it says, "And I will pour on the house of David and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. Then they will look on me, whom they have pierced. Yes, they'll mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for a firstborn." So you see, the idea is, it's when does God pour out his spirit, the spirit of grace and supplication? This is going to take place in the end times. In the 7 years of tribulation, God's going to pour out his spirit again on Israel, on Jewish people. There's going to be an event. You see, after the two witnesses in Revelation 11 are killed, they're going to be murdered in the streets. After which the Antichrist will walk into the temple, the rebuilt Jewish temple in Jerusalem, I believe to the north side of the Dome of the Rock, and he will declare himself to be God, and he will command and demand that he be worshipped. It is at this point that this person, in whom many of the Jews, most of the Jews, I think, who aren't already believing in Jesus, thought he was their Messiah. But this is going to be the event that opens their eyes, and there's going to be a massive revival amongst the Jewish people. God will pour out his spirit on them, and it'll be like someone just turns on the light, and they will look on me, God speaking, whom they've pierced, and they'll mourn as one mourns for the loss of their only child. There'll be a realization that they had crucified God. There'll be a realization that they had crucified their Messiah. No, not the people of the tribulation, their ancestors, but they realized it was them. That was him, and they done messed up. And so it is in that tribulation period where God will pour out his spirit upon them, and we'll see a massive revival. That 144,000 Revelation, that's 144,000 Jews. Ain't no Jehovah's Witnesses or anyone else. If you read it, it names the tribes that they're from. It's 144,000 Jewish people. And they are going to be like 144,000 Billy Grahams out there preaching the word. And if you read the book of Revelation, it speaks of numbers of people who are being martyred in such mass quantity, but they were believers. And if this is post-rapture, that means they had to have been converts during the tribulation, and therefore during the tribulation we're going to see one of the most massive revivals of all time. We're going to see numerous people being turned to the faith and having to oppose the Antichrist and the mark of the beast and all that other stuff. But guess what? That's in the future. We who are alive and remain, we're going to be caught up to be with him. As he said back in chapter 12, where I go, there you will be with me also. No, chapter 14, that where I go, you may be with me also. Right? That he's going to bring us to be with him. As it says in 1 Thessalonians, that we will, or alive and will be caught up to be with him in heaven, and there we will forever remain with him. So the idea is we'll be with Jesus at that point. But they pierce him. Same word in the Septuagint. I'm like 95% sure. Where the Old Testament is in Greek, that word in Zechariah 12:10 is, they'll look on me whom they've pierced, and that's the piercing of his hands and his feet, but also here being pierced with a spear, which is just my keyword reminder of that verse to go back and take a look. Let's get down to verse 37 today, at least. So in verse 35 it says, and he who has seen has testified, and his testimony is true, and he knows that he is telling the truth, so that you may believe. For the script, oh, here's the verse I was looking for. That's embarrassing. For these things were done that the scripture might be fulfilled. Not one of his bones shall be broken. That is in Psalm 34:20. And again, another scripture, they shall look on him whom they've pierced. There's your Zechariah 12:10. So, I got excited and got carried away before I just finished reading the next couple verses. Very good to continue reading all the Bible verses in context. Makes it so you don't look like a fool on a live stream. Anyway, so that kind of wraps up what we are talking about today. And I don't think we've got time to dive into tomorrow what we're going to be looking at. But Joseph of Arimathea, Nicodemus Ben Gurion, Nick at Night, they're going to take his body, and there's going to be something so beautiful about what they do. It's going to be cool. And that's going to be tomorrow. So tomorrow morning, 7:30, we're going to find out what great sacrifice they make for their Lord. I'll see you guys then.